Hello and welcome back to the Wizard's Tower. Today we're going to be taking a look at Wildlands, a game by Martin Wallace. Now this is an absolutely fantastic game, so this isn't really a review so much as a quick look under the hood of what's going on inside this box. I can already tell you that I do really enjoy this game. Again, it's another versus game like Dragon Realm that Katie and I actually enjoy playing together. So let's have a look what's inside. Right, so let's take a look inside the box. So when you open it up, first thing you'll see is an advertisement. So this is for Unquiet Dead, which is one of the expansions I've got, and Frostgrave, which is their fantasy skirmish game. Got the rulebook, beautifully illustrated, very simple to follow. A little bit of lore in there as well. A very good game. Right, next have the board. We'll take a closer look at that in detail in a minute. And then you have two trays. And the first tray and the second tray. So, let's take a look at all this stuff in a bit more detail. So first up, let's take a look at the board, which as you can see, pretty big. It's also double-sided. And here you can see some details of the board. The spaces are denoted by the white lines, and then you have the space numbers inside them. If it's a number like this, with the white number inside a black core, they're called, then that means that that space has cover, which will come into play a bit later. And if it's a black number inside a white core like this, then that space does not have cover. There are also some arrows on this side of the board, there are not on the flip side. That denotes higher ground, so you would need to climb up there in order to get to this space. And I believe that you cannot draw a line of sight between a space on lower ground and higher ground. There are also these hollow arrows, and that denotes that you can simply move from that space to that space. Line of sight works by drawing a literal line between the two cores in a space. So for example, these two spaces have line of sight. This and this do not have line of sight because there is a wall in the way, but this and this space do. However, both of these spaces have cover, which will make it more difficult to shoot or cast spells between them. And here is the other side of the board, which is the dungeon side. Now this is the side that they recommend for your first couple of games, because there is no higher ground, lower ground, any of that. There is just, you know, the standard dungeon layout. There is still the cores with cover and without cover, and the line of sight rules still work the same. You can't draw line of sight between that space and that space, for example, but there is slightly less information on here to deal with. Therefore, this is the starting board. This is also the board I prefer to play on. Right, and now let's look at the trays in a bit more detail. So this is the first tray on the top, and you get cards and your factions miniatures. You get the gems, and you also get these little bases which just clip on quite easily. There we go. Now there are 4 factions in the game. Each faction will get this stuff here. Let's take a look at these miniatures because they are nice. And they come pre-shaded. So I haven't put any paint on these. This is just how they come. Like a witch hunter guy there. Little halfling. Beastman. So you get the idea. These are nice figures. They do the job. Got a dog hair on there. And then you have these little plastic gems. And as I say, the cards. So these are the 3 types of cards that every faction will have. You have the character cards, which just give you a breakdown of each character in your faction. It includes their symbol, how much health they have, and obviously their name. You then have these action cards, and these action cards feature the artwork of the characters, but that doesn't matter. If you can ignore the art, it's just a nice picture to look at, essentially. But what they do feature are these flags that let you know the different type of actions you can take with the different type of characters. Okay, and if there isn't a little banner here that next to the person's icon, like here, then that means that you can use the card only to move. You can always use a card to move if the icon is there, but if there is no banner next to it, then it means that you can only use it to move. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. And finally, you have a faction card. So this just lets you know the breakdown of what all of the different factions have as far as the symbols in here. And it also has a quick reference guide for the type of attacks, which is melee, ranged, heavy ranged, and area. And then you have what can defend it. So shield, that one's cover, and then there's melee there as well. So what you would do is lay out all of your different characters so that you can see their symbols and how much health they have. And then you have these action cards, and these action cards literally tell you what you can do. So you'd have a hand of them, and let's say that you had Joni on the board. You could use the this card with Joni. You could use it to move, or you could use it to do something called rally, which is that you would move both Joni and one other character. There is also a symbol for fly, and there are some wild symbols which I will go into in a minute. You could also, again, rally or rally. Wow, so Joni has actually got 3 possible rally cards. Now what that means is you could essentially move her. If you wanted to play all 3 of these cards, you could move Joni 3 times and 3 other characters once, or one character another 3 times, however you wish to do it. So you get the idea. This one here would let Moira, because she's got the same symbol, do a heavy ranged attack. It would also allow James, who's got that symbol there, to block. So if somebody attacked James, you could literally play this card to block that attack. So then you have these wild symbols, and that is basically, you've got wild movement, you've got draw 2 cards, and you've got something called interrupt. Interrupt is a really interesting mechanic whereby you can play interrupt to literally interrupt another player's turn and start a turn of your own, whereby you can play as many cards as you like, and then once your turn is over, it returns back to that original person's turn. And interrupt can be interrupted by another interrupt symbol. So you might interrupt player A by playing this card, and you start playing cards, and then somebody interrupts you and they start playing cards, and then at the end of that it would go back to player A. So let's go back to looking at these. You've got the active player token, which just lets you know who is actually the active player. And as I said, you have these crystal shards. These are essentially the point of the entire game, which is that you are running around trying to find all of your colour crystals which match your base. And here is the second tray. So in the second tray, it's another faction, another 2 factions I should say, with their wonderful miniatures. I really do like this owlbear. He's a wizard, it's pretty cool. But then you also have the map cards, I believe they're called, and you have the health. So this is quite simply, every time you take damage, you pop a damage on the card. These are where some of the genius for the game comes from, these map cards. So the icons on here relate to all of the different spaces on the board. So you essentially have a deck that contains all of those spaces. And what you do is you shuffle it up at the beginning of the game, and you deal 10 to each player, face down. What they then do is, out of those 10, they select 5 that will be their players, their characters' starting positions. And then the other 5, they pass to the player on the left, like face down. And that is where that player's crystals go. So essentially, if you had 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, here I might decide, okay, well, I want one of my characters, so you'd put that face down under their character card, and that's where they start, because the miniatures don't start on the board. And that one I think will be a crystal card, that one can be a starting card. You get the idea. So you're placing the ones that you want for your character's starting positions face down under their card, and then you're going to end up with 5 cards that you pass to the player on your left. They then look at those and put their crystals on those spaces. So that was a quick look inside the core box, but I also have both of the expansions and figure I might as well show you. So the first one is the Unquiet Dead, and this is literally an undead faction. You get a little rules booklet here that just lets you know how to play with them. And then you also get your faction cards, the same as before. And you also get the miniatures for your characters. Now, one slight difference in the faction is that, as you can see, it comes with an extra base. And that's because there are 6 instead of 5. The other slight difference is that you can play it as a normal faction if you like, or you can play the They Won't Stay Down encounter, which essentially has these guys running around the board while you're playing your game. So these become like AI controlled monsters on the board. And the same goes for the Adventuring Party, which is the second expansion. So you have the faction as normal, but you also have the Looter encounter. So essentially these guys will run around trying to steal your crystal shards while you're running around trying to get your own crystal shards. Again, these come with some gorgeous miniatures. Oop. And there are only 4 characters in the Adventuring Party, and once again you get the faction cards. And the great thing is that all of these extra expansion bit of content can actually fit in the core box, so you don't need to keep things lying around like so, and these slot go in here like so, and you're all set. Right, so that was a quick look inside the box, and as I said in my intro, I really do enjoy this game. It's one of the few competitive games, up there with Dragon Realm I would say, as competitive games that Katie and I really enjoy. The rulebook is laid out beautifully, it's all very easy to understand where everything is. I should also point out that winning is simply a case of the first player to 5 points. Now you get a point for killing opponents, and you get a point for collecting your shards. So you can play basically 3 different ways. You can focus on collecting those shards, you can focus on knocking out opponents' characters, or you can do a bit of both. And the first person to have 5 points wins the game. So for 2 to 4 players, it plays in about an hour, and I really like it. So that was my quick look at Wildlands. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, share it if you want to be extra nice, and subscribe if you're not already. I do have a Twitter, I do have a Facebook that I don't use that often, but by all means head over there and you'll see regular updates. Thanks for joining me, and take care. I'll see you next time.